Excellent. Good afternoon. It's nice to be here a year later, and most of the panel members, we were together again last year here. So, Bobby De Ocampo last year said the focus should be infrastructure, infrastructure, infrastructure. Gentlemen, infrastructure. So let's start. Why don't I just throw, it's been a year, the key accomplishment, and then with that, what do you want to see happen next? So we'll go through and then we'll open it up to questions after. Why don't we start, Ed?
Good morning. I guess to the point, in terms of the key accomplishments, the coalition has done its job. The PPP center is in place. Resource mobilization has been, resource building is in the works. As Secretary Jimenez and Bill Lu said, it's really, demand is easy now. It's getting the supply out. It's getting the strategies in place. I think that's what I want to see. But in terms of accomplishments, I represent the private sector. The private sector has already funded, I guess, the DepEd classrooms. The private sector, and in fact BDO, were willing to provide the 30 billion financing for the LRT. We're willing to provide the 12 billion financing for the NIA Expressway. That's just us, but we're willing to work with the rest of the locals. I'm glad to have read that the JBIC is willing the 30 billion for the LRT, which is the component the government needs. So that in itself shows you we're putting our money where our mouth is, because there's a component needed by the private sector for the sponsor, which we're willing to provide, and the Japanese government is willing to provide the other balance. All the local banks are competing. We're willing to finance MRT, MRT-7, MRT-3, even the Cebu-Mactan Airport. We're very interested. We just need to see the numbers. National Orthopedic, we're looking at the numbers and willing to look at the financing of that. Automated fare collection of the government, and in fact, I'm private sector, but I'm sort of espousing the government's role. But there have been more than 24 interested bidders. I was in the bid conference. So that shows you how successful these programs are. So there's more than enough equity interested. The government has already launched together with SSS and GSIS the Pinay Fund, and they're willing to provide equity. So I guess it's really just waiting now for the projects. The projects are there, and we want more projects. The private sector is ready. There's enough demand. I remember when the DOF and DPWH went on road shows with the PPP, a lot of foreign interests showed up. I was with them in Singapore and Geneva, and it was always packed fully. I think they went to Australia. I was not with them, and there was also so much interest. So we are in our sweet spot. We just want to make sure we don't drop the ball, and so that we can continue with this. Now, the last point I wanted to say, Maria, is that the PPP is not all the infrastructure the government is doing. And in fact, maybe our NED speaker can elaborate, because there's so many investments being done by the governments that's not being reported, but it's showing up as investments. And those are also critical, because those have their multiplier effects, and that's where I guess the other distinguished panelists can elaborate on.
Fantastic. Ed Francisco from BDO, he spoke on policy. Let's go to transportation. Ito Carlos.
Thank you, Maria. Actually, we would like to thank the government, Congress, too, for answering the call of the private sector. They were concerned about the airlines, were concerned about the customs, immigration, quarantine, overtime. That the government finally decided we will operate 24/7 if you do, and we have the budget for that. The second issue that the airlines, flying international lines, were concerned with were the common carriers tax and the Philippine gross billings tax, which were both approved by Congress to remove the common carriers tax and made a conditional one on the Philippine gross billings tax by making it reciprocal, based on reciprocity. The other thing is the amendment of the BOT law, which I think will be put into effect pretty soon by NEDA, which allows for joint venture and other modifications. And finally, they encourage the transfer of the use of Subic and Batangas by reducing the wharfage fees by 50%. On general issues, however, we'd like to also thank Director General Rolly Tumpalan for his presentation this morning, and we'd like to reiterate that we fully support all of those things and emphasize that we would like to really have NEDA create a multi-transport policy issue that will look at all the basic transport sectors in the country and see how we can harmonize and actually make them interconnected and intermodal so that we'll facilitate the transport situation. One issue that was brought up by Secretary Jimenez just now is that a lot of people don't have to fly to Manila. They can go over to the other airports too. Who knows, it might relieve the congestion in the NAIA 3. These are issues, I think, that can be integrated in a national policy. That means we also have to have a more open skies, a wider open skies application. We also agree that we should, AmCham Arangkada has been batting for this for some time now, get that GDP, 5% of GDP investment in infrastructures. Otherwise, we already won't move forward. I'm glad it's there in your plans. However, there's another issue that we'd like to address, this one to Congress, because we inherited a lot of laws from the Marcos regime, which combines the regulatory and developmental functions in the line agencies of government, like PPA, the CAAP, and so on. And this confuses the issue because public interest is often sacrificed for in such an arrangement. So we would like to separate the regulatory function from the developmental function. In the meantime, perhaps if it can be done by executive order, allow the users to participate in the regulatory functions so that they can at least benefit from all this development.
Sorry to interrupt, Ito. We just had time called on us. Let me give the other gentleman a chance. Ray Cunningham, it's nice to see you again. Power and water, please.
Thank you very much. The foundation, of course, for power is the Electric Power Industry Reform Act of 2001. It's now approaching its 13th year. The most significant achievement out of our 21 recommendations really was finally in December of 2012, the trial period of the open access and retail competition was announced. In June, it will go forward on a restricted basis, but on a actual basis. It's absolutely essential to achieve the intent and objectives of the Electric Power Industry Reform Act. In addition, I think there's been some significant improvements to the transmission system under the concessionaire National Grid Corporation of the Philippines. Beyond that, not so much on the 21 recommendations. For water supply, we had 9 recommendations. The good news is that significant progress was made on all 9. There are several bills in Congress under consideration, some dealing with regulatory reform, some dealing with structural reform. Both are needed. We advocate approaching water on a river basin basis rather than political geographic boundaries. Water doesn't care what municipality or province it's in. And to focus on all the benefits of water, whether it be water supply, power, hydropower, irrigation, and of course, flood control, very, very important. So we are hopeful that during 2013, some positive measures will come out of the Congress that can help structure this. Some of the bills, though, I must caution, are extremely bureaucratic and I think unlikely to succeed, but there are some very positive signs in some of those bills also.
Okay, Donald, let's wrap it with the accomplishments in telecommunications.
Thank you, Maria. On the telecom side, which is predominantly driven by the private sector, we've had a lot of positive developments over the last few years. We have, I think, nearly 90 million subscribers combined in the country. So high penetration. We have excellent fiber optic networks throughout the country. Good resiliency for supporting the BPO sector. We have strong wireless broadband. Both major networks now are deploying LTE, which is the next generation of fourth generation wireless technology. That's all very positive. I think on the side that we need to address in 2013, under President Ramos's tenure in the 90s, we passed the Republic Act 7925, which is the Telecom Policy Act that basically provided the legal framework for deregulation. That law is over 15 years old. So in the digital world, as you know, that's a long time. So we need to move toward convergence. There were some efforts made in the last administration to try to pass legislation on convergence, but we didn't get the muscle to make it happen. So I think convergence really has to happen in the near future to help us to stay competitive with our ASEAN partners. A couple other items I might note. We have no satellite today, a Philippine satellite. In the 90s, we had Mabuhay. Mabuhay satellite was a great bird and provided strong connectivity for the 7,000 islands we have. Today, we have to source from Malaysia, Hong Kong, or Thailand, for example. So hopefully that's something that we can get some focus on moving forward. A strong satellite will provide excellent educational services all over the country. Lastly, I think that leads me to, we tried very hard this last year to support the creation of Department of ICT, which I think would have had a lot of merits. The House and the Senate passed it. It got to the BICAM session and it was frozen there. Unfortunately, we ran out of time and we'll have to start again. So hopefully in 2013 we can make that happen. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you. Let's put all of this. Undersecretary Tambalan is also on the panel. You can tweet your questions, you can text your questions. These will all be answered later on once we finish the panel. But let me ask you to put this in context, because if you look at the handbooks that Arangkada's actually put together, we are not doing so well in ASEAN +6. In fact, if you look at policy, we rank 5 out of the 6 nations in capital outlays. For airports, we're the bottom, 6 out of 6. For seaports, bottom, 6 out of 6. Roads and rails, we're number 4 out of 6. For water, 5 out of 6. Telecommunications, 5 out of 6. We've actually moved back from number 2 in 2003. Gentlemen, what do we need to do to actually compete more?
Well, I think in power, we need more foreign investment. And, you know, Congress passed the Renewable Energy Act, but DOE imposed foreign ownership restrictions. Why? And if you're trying to build a power plant, such as my colleague Dan Chalmers on the co-chair of our Energy Committee, why does the foreign contractor have to get 60% Filipino partner? The PCAB, the Philippine Contractor Accreditation Board, is in the way. So we want to do everything, we recommend doing everything we can to allow foreign investment and the benefits of major foreign expertise.
Please, Ito.
For example, concerning our NAIA problem, which is congested, if we had the open skies, we applied it, and as Secretary Jimenez said, people will fly directly to the other airports. The other thing is perhaps we should light up the other provincial airports so they can operate at night. This is something else that we can do. In other words, why don't we apply existing policies, just broaden them and apply them?
Wonderful. So far, you brought up 2 points that have already been brought up before. Foreign ownership, we have members of Congress who are here, and NAIA. Ed, do you want to?
Yes, last night I was with Secretary Domingo on the PSE. These things are working because, as you know, there's this memo that the SEC came out with in the Supreme Court on foreign ownership, and it looks like there's going to be without preempting, but at least a new draft will be coming out. It's not perfect, but it will address our issues. So that should also address the concerns of most of the investors and sponsors here on doing business.
And Donald, on telcos, how could we have moved back?
Good question. I think one of the issues that Ray mentioned is that we're also handicapped by having a 60%, 40% cap on foreign equity. So that's still a struggle. Of course, that takes changes in the Constitution to amend, so that's a tough one. But I think on the other side that we talk about more frequently was the creation of the Department of ICT. We're the only nation in ASEAN that doesn't have a dedicated full-time cabinet secretary overseeing ICT. And I still think that although DOST is trying to cope up with supporting the BPO, which I think they're doing a good job, the telecoms has moved to the back burner and we're not really getting the support there.
We're actually number 4 out of 6 in terms of internet penetration.
Let me say that we have a very clear and implementable Philippine development plan. And the roadmaps that are coming out would give very specific directions. But I think the bonus is we now have in the Infrastructure Committee a working mechanism that brings together the infrastructure agencies to do what, where, and when. So that very mechanism that is now working is to me what would make a difference in infrastructure planning and development.
So it sounds like, please, Ito.
For example, we have Subic and Batangas Seaports. They've been waiting, operating at 3% of capacity. And we've been pushing traffic in that direction. But the big trouble is that while the trucks are causing a tremendous nightmare in Manila. When you go home at night, for example, you get to your home at 10 o'clock, the trucks are already in the road. Actually, what we need is MMDA to kind of induce those trucks to go to Batangas and Subic instead. Let's tighten that window of operation for the trucks. And that will ease the traffic for the Manila traffic system. We can do that, and at the same time, the government has already helped by reducing the wharfage fee. What we need to do is reduce the cargo handling fees for the sake of the shippers.
Fantastic. Ray, you have always been outspoken. If you were to want one thing done this year, what do you want?
Well, on the power side, we really need open access and retail competition. You know, we've had to wait 2 years because despite having satisfied the criteria a long time ago, the computer programs, the billing and settlement programs and so forth, were not ready. No one had taken any steps. So we desperately need that to go forward because people are getting impatient to see the effects of the power reform solved. So that's my big hope for power.
We still have one of the most expensive electricity costs. I know this has been a forever problem and everybody has addressed it in different ways.
Well, true that power is expensive in the Philippines, but we do not subsidize our power.
Correct.
And one reason why it's so cheap in some countries relative to the Philippines is because it's being subsidized. And this is counterproductive, and many of those countries are getting out of that mode now. In addition, we have to keep remembering, the Philippines is a group of islands. So in order to transmit power, we have to have submarine cables, and it really makes it more costly for us. Those are things that we can't change so easily. But nonetheless, I believe EPIRA, the Electric Power Industry Reform Act, can deliver on its promise.
Will there be power shortages in 2013? I mean, do you expect, we've been seeing some of it in 2012, hasn't been as bad as expected by John, by Arangkada, but without what you're asking for, what do you see?
There's a chance that we could skate through until 2016, but right now, the GN Power Project is being commissioned. It should be ready by the beginning of the second quarter. That should help us greatly until perhaps 2015. At that point, whether the oil-fired plants we have will carry us through until other cheaper plants are built, I'm not so sure.
Thank you. Our time is up, gentlemen. Thank you very much for your thoughts. You can still text your questions to the number on the left, and they will be given to it. We'll move on to the next panel. Thank you.